Thank you for joining me today. Today's video is part of a Thanksgiving collaboration between myself, Hands That Cook, Chef Tovia Gartenberg, and Simply Sarah. So after the end of this video, be sure to go check out their videos next. In my video, I will be making an apple cake. This recipe is absolutely delicious and it's always a favorite with my family. If you give this recipe a try, I guarantee you that you won't be disappointed. So let's get started and I'll show you the ingredients that you will need. So to do our recipe today, we will be needing some apples. I'm using the Gala apples, self-rising flour, white granulated sugar, vegetable oil, 3 large eggs, vanilla, and a little dash of cinnamon. Okay, the first thing I've done is I have went ahead and I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. My next step is to peel and dice up my apples. Now the type of apple that you use in this apple cake is very important. Now I'm going with a Gala apple. It's slightly sweet, but it also has a tart bite to it, but not overly tart. Now you'll want to go with some type of apple that's similar to that. The Gala apples are good, the Rome apples are good, and that's a couple that I can just think of up off the top of my head. But you want to stay away from the ones like the Granny Smith apples. I know a lot of people, that's their go-to apple for cakes, pies, and all that, but for this recipe they don't work out well. They're just too tart. So stay away from anything that's too tart. You want it slightly sweet, slightly tart. Okay? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to peel about 3 or 4 of these Gala apples and get them diced up. Now this recipe calls for about 3.5 cups of diced apples. Now when you go to peeling and dicing up your apples, if when you measure it out it comes to slightly over or just slightly under the 3.5 cups, don't worry about it. You're not going to mess up your recipe if you end up with 4 cups of diced apples instead of the 3.5, and vice versa. So what I'm going to do is show you how that I peel and do my apples. Okay, the first part I'm just peeling the apple. Now if you leave little bits of the peel on there, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Now some people will take and half their apples in half and then take the core out from the halves, but I don't. I just go slice down the sides, and be careful and not slice into the core, and just do it this way. It's much faster. So there you go. Your core is right there and you can just toss it to the side. And then as I go to slice up my apple from there, I just do slices. Okay. So from here I'm going to finish peeling my apples and slicing up the apple slices, and I'll bring you back when we're ready for the next step. Okay, now we're ready for the next step, and I have all my apples in slices. So from here, to get them in a small dice, I'm going to use my biscuit cutter. And you want this to be cut up into a small dice. You don't want any large chunks. Here are my apples after I have them diced up. Now they're not all uniform in size, and really that's not important. The important part was not having real large chunks. So I've diced them up pretty small. And so now we're going to set these aside and we'll move on to our next step. Okay, we're ready for our next step. I have a large bowl here that I'm going to do my mixing in. And the first ingredient I'm going to add to my bowl is my sugar. And I'm going to be adding 2 cups of sugar. Now, my jar is small at the top, so I'm going to have to use this half cup measure. So I'll be adding 4 half cups, which will total up to your 2 cups sugar. Next, I'll add my 3 large eggs, and if you have extra large eggs, those will work fine too. It won't mess up your recipe. And then we're going to add our oil, and this is 3/4 cup of vegetable oil. If you have canola oil or something a little similar, that'll work fine too. And I'm going to put just a little dash or 2 of cinnamon. That might be 1/4 teaspoon or 1/2 teaspoon. It's not much. I don't like it to be overpowered with cinnamon flavor. But now if you really want the cinnamon flavor to come through for your cake, add just a little bit more. But be careful because it's very easy to get it too strong. And then I'm going to add about 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And now I'm just going to take a whisk and whisk this together till everything is mixed up really good. Okay, for my next step, I'm going to add my self-rising flour, and I'll be using 2 cups, but I'm going to add just a cup at a time and stir it until I get everything mixed up real well. There's 1. Okay, now I'm going to add my 2nd cup of flour. Now after I add my 2nd cup of flour, as I'm stirring this dough or batter is going to get really stiff, but that's the way it's supposed to be. So if yours does that, don't worry, that's the way it's supposed to be. Now my final step is to add all the diced apples. And once you add your apples, it'll get a lot easier to mix your batter and your apples together, because that helps loosen up this batter a little bit. So we're just going to get all these apples mixed well inside the batter. Okay, and this is how our batter looks so far. Okay, so for our next step, we're going to get our baking pan prepared. So I'm going to set this aside. Okay, this is the cake pan that I'll be using. It's called a bundt pan, and this has always been the cake pan that I've always used for my apple cakes. So if you use another type of baking pan, I'm not sure about how many minutes it would take to bake your cake, so that might be something you have to experiment with a little bit if you're not going to use a bundt pan. But this is a heavy metal, and it works really great for these apple cakes. Okay, the way I do my pan to get it ready for my batter is I like to use this Baker's Joy, and it's just a combination of oil and flour base, and that coats the cake pan and keeps your cake from sticking to the inside. Now if you don't have this and you don't want to use it or don't want to go buy it, you can lightly coat the inside of your cake pan with some shortening and just put it on real thin, and then you can dust it with a little flour and it'll work the same. But I like using the Baker's Joy just for convenience. So I'm just going to spray that in there. That should do it. So next I'm going to start spooning my batter into my bundt pan. Now another tip I'd like to give you about this apple cake recipe is you can also add a little bit of chopped walnuts to it. I had a lady I used to fix this cake for all the time, and she always requested that I put some chopped walnuts in it, and it's good, but not everybody likes any kind of walnut or anything in their cakes, so I usually just fix it without it. But I do like the addition of chopped walnuts to the cake. Now I'm just going to shake the pan a little bit to help get the air bubbles out, and this will help level out your batter so that it will bake evenly. Okay, now it's ready to go into the oven, and I'm going to place this in the oven and allow it to bake 40 to 50 minutes. Now it usually takes closer to 50 minutes, so you'll just have to kindly watch it, you know, because everybody's oven's different. But when a toothpick inserted comes out clean, you know it's done. And this should have a nice, rich, golden brown color to it. So I'll bring you back when it's baked and done. My cake is finished baking and is out of the oven, and this is what it looks like. And it smells so good. Now in the past when I've made this cake, I've fixed a homemade cream cheese frosting, and it pairs up really well with this cake. And you know, some people like their apple cake with the frosting, some without. So what I usually do is fix up the frosting in a bowl and just set it to the side, and if anybody wants to add any of the frosting to their slice, they can do it then. So thank you all for joining me today. Be sure to check out the others' channels, Hands That Cook, Chef Tovia Gartenberg, and Simply Sarah. Their links will be down in the description box below. Thank you all. Until next time.